A desperate little girl runs out crying, pointing frantically at her house. Moments later, police cars swarm the street, shutting it down. What the terrified child confesses to a garbage collector transforms his ordinary morning into a nightmare, exposing a long-hidden secret. Marcus Taylor drove his garbage truck through the quiet suburban streets, the morning sun casting shadows across manicured lawns. Glancing at the clock, he realized he was 35 minutes behind schedule, delayed by his partner's sudden absence. Despite the setback, his movements were swift and practiced, a result of 2 years on the job. Brightwood was a familiar route. Marcus knew every turn, and many of the residents, taking pride in his role in keeping the community clean. As he approached the next house, he noticed Rachel Harper and her daughter Lucy stepping out of their car. Normally, Rachel greeted him warmly, and Lucy would wave. But today, Lucy kept her head down, and Rachel's strained "hi" felt more like an obligation. Something about their demeanor unsettled Marcus. Shrugging it off, he wheeled their bin to the truck. As he emptied it, a loosely tied bag caught his attention. Inside were brand new children's clothes with tags, a backpack, school supplies, and toys. Items too valuable to be discarded. Concerned, Marcus retrieved the bag and approached Rachel's door. When she answered, she looked disheveled, her usual composure gone. Holding up the bag, Marcus said, "Mrs. Harper, I noticed these in your trash. If they're still good, there are donation centers nearby where they could help others." Rachel's reaction was sharp and defensive. "What I throw away is none of your business," she snapped, her voice shaking. Before Marcus could respond, a loud crash echoed from inside. Rachel froze, her expression flashing with fear before she slammed the door shut. Marcus stood there, stunned. Something was clearly wrong. Reluctantly, he returned to his truck, placing the rescued bag beside him instead of discarding it. As he drove off, Rachel's fear and the sound of breaking glass lingered in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had just walked away from a situation far more troubling than it seemed. Marcus had faced prejudice before, but rarely in such a blatant and cruel manner. He felt Lucy trembling behind him, her small hands clutching his uniform tightly. The father's tirade escalated, his voice dripping with disdain. "I should call your employer right now. Better yet, I'll call the police. How dare a black criminal like you interfere in my family's matters?" Marcus's instincts screamed at him to defend himself, but he knew the stakes. Losing his temper would only reinforce the man's vile assumptions. Lucy was still clinging to him, and he had to think of her safety above his own pride. With a deep breath, Marcus forced himself to remain calm. "Sir," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "I understand you're upset, but your daughter came to me asking for help. I'm just trying to make sure she's okay." The father scoffed. "She doesn't need help from the likes of you. Lucy, come here now." He reached out to grab her, but Lucy shrank back, pressing closer to Marcus. Torn, Marcus crouched down to meet her eyes. "Lucy, I'm sorry," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I can't protect you. Your father's right. I have no authority here. You should go home with him." The words felt like betrayal even as he spoke them, and Lucy's wide, fearful eyes made his heart ache. As the father pulled her away, she suddenly broke free and ran back to Marcus, her voice trembling with desperation. "Please, don't make me go back. I'd rather die than go home with him. My dad is bad." The raw fear in her voice sent a chill through Marcus. His instincts had been right. Something was horribly wrong. "Sir, I think there's more going on here," Marcus said, standing protectively in front of Lucy. "She's terrified, and I can't ignore that." The father's face twisted with rage. "Give me my daughter now, or I'll have you arrested." Marcus stood firm. "Go ahead and call the police," he said, his tone resolute. "But I'll also be calling child services. No child should feel this way about their own parent." At the mention of child services, the father's bravado cracked. Fear flickered across his face, and he retreated, muttering threats as he disappeared into the house. Marcus turned to Lucy, who was clinging to him like a lifeline. "Lucy, can you tell me what's going on?" Before she could respond, the house door burst open. The father emerged, dragging a battered woman, Rachel. Her face was swollen and bruised, one eye barely able to open. Her silent plea for help struck Marcus to his core. The man shoved Rachel into a car and sped off, tires screeching. Lucy's cries echoed in the air. "Please, don't let him hurt Mommy anymore." Marcus knelt beside her, his voice soft but firm. "Lucy, I need you to show me what's been happening." Lucy nodded and led him into the house. Inside, the signs of violence were everywhere: shattered glass, splintered furniture, and scattered belongings. Marcus's heart sank as he pieced together the story of desperation and chaos. "Lucy," he said gently, "I'm calling the police. Is that okay?" She nodded, her eyes filled with a fragile hope. As Marcus relayed the details to the operator, sirens wailed in the distance. Police cars pulled up, and officers quickly secured the scene. A kind-looking officer, Sarah, crouched down to Lucy's level. "Hi, Lucy. I'm Officer Sarah. Can you tell me what happened?" Through trembling lips, Lucy whispered, "Dad took Mom. He hurts her really bad. I'm scared I'll never see her again." Tears welled in her eyes. "He's worse than a monster." Officer Sarah's face hardened as she exchanged a glance with Marcus. "We'll find your mom," she promised, "and we'll make sure you're safe." Marcus stayed with Lucy, his presence a shield against the chaos around her. As police investigated and the situation unfolded, he silently vowed to protect this little girl and her mother, no matter the cost. The threatening man from earlier crumbled to his knees on the lawn, tears streaming down his face as he cried out, "Lucy, baby, please. Daddy loves you. This is all a misunderstanding." Marcus felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to believe in the sincerity of the man's tears, to hope there was still a loving father buried beneath the violence and anger. But the image of Rachel's battered face and Lucy's terror burned into his memory reminded him that abusers often used emotional manipulation as a tactic. The police seemed equally torn, their faces a mixture of skepticism and uncertainty as they dealt with the now weeping man. Maintaining their professionalism, they secured him in handcuffs despite his pleas. Meanwhile, other officers retrieved the car keys from the man and freed Rachel from the vehicle. Marcus, with Lucy by his side, helped escort Rachel to the porch. The little girl clung to his hand, her wide eyes never leaving her mother's face. As they reached the porch, the front door opened to reveal an older woman who could only be Lucy's grandmother. Her face, etched with worry, softened with relief at the sight of her daughter and granddaughter. "Oh, thank God," she whispered, rushing forward to embrace them. She guided Rachel to a chair and quickly fetched a glass of water and a towel-wrapped ice pack for her swollen face. Lucy remained protectively close, her small hand resting on Rachel's arm, as if to reassure herself that her mother was truly safe. Marcus stood nearby, relieved the immediate danger had passed, but uncertain about what lay ahead. Rachel sipped the water, color slowly returning to her face. Marcus felt a mix of emotions: relief, anger at the abuse they had endured, and worry about the repercussions he might face for his involvement. The porch grew heavy with unspoken truths. Rachel, now more alert, sat in the outdoor chair with Lucy nestled against her side. Marcus lingered nearby, feeling both like an intruder and a necessary presence in this fragile family moment. An officer approached, introducing himself as Detective Johnson. His calm demeanor stood in sharp contrast to the violence they had just experienced. "Mrs. Harper," he began gently, "I know this is difficult, but we need to understand what happened. Can you tell us about your relationship with your husband? Rachel took a deep breath, wincing at the pain in her bruised ribs, and began to reveal their tragic history. "We've been married for 8 years, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. At first, everything was perfect. Dennis was charming, successful, the ideal husband and father. She paused, stroking Lucy's hair. But then things changed. His business success paralleled his descent into addiction. The stress led him to drink heavily. Her voice grew stronger as she continued, as though unburdening herself gave her strength. It started with verbal abuse, put-downs, controlling behavior, isolating me from friends and family. Then came the physical intimidation, throwing things, punching walls. I kept making excuses, believing he would change. But 3 years ago, Lucy witnessed one of his violent outbursts. That was the breaking point. I knew I had to leave, for her sake, if not my own. Rachel's voice faltered as tears welled up. We got divorced, but Dennis couldn't accept it. He would show up unannounced, trying to assert control over me and Lucy. I got a restraining order, but... She gestured to her bruised face. You can see how much that mattered to him. He believes his wealth and influence can shield him from consequences. Detective Johnson nodded, taking notes. Can you tell us what led to today's events? He asked. Rachel recounted the morning's events, her voice trembling but resolute. Dennis had shown up drunk, furious about their canceled family trip, and became violent. He said he would take Lucy, and that he didn't need passports because his connections could make her disappear. She hesitated, glancing at Marcus. If it weren't for Marcus, I don't know what might have happened. Detective Johnson turned to Marcus. Mr. Taylor, your testimony could be crucial in this case. We'll need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. Marcus nodded, his mind racing with the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, another officer reported that Dennis had failed a breathalyzer test and was over the legal limit. Detective Johnson's face hardened. That settles it. We're charging him with driving under the influence, domestic abuse, violating a restraining order, and attempted kidnapping. As the officers finalized the arrest, Rachel's mother stepped forward, reassuring her daughter and granddaughter. Detective Johnson thanked Marcus for his actions. Your courage today saved lives, he said. As they all prepared to head to the station, Marcus felt a whirlwind of emotions, relief, pride, and anxiety about his job and the future. But deep down, he knew he wouldn't have done anything differently. Some choices, no matter the cost, are worth making.